Happy Tuesday morning, everyone. Hope you are having a wonderful day so far and hope it continues to get better for you. This is Rintoul and Sermon. I am Karen Sermon. Jamie Dodd in this week, all week for vacationing Scott Rintoul. He'll be back on Monday. Jamie, good morning. How are you today?
I'm doing fantastic, Karen. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. It's sun is shining in the kitchen window. Don't have to have any extra lights on. The door's open. It's going to be a nice, beautiful day again. I know we're not happy about that when it comes to sleeping, but at least I think for you, it's starting to get to those days where it can get warm during the day, but at least it gets cool at night.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, we're talking totally different than what we've experienced in other parts of the summer. Like, I think high is 24 today, right? There was times where the low was 24, Karen.
Right,
so
I know.
I'll take a high of 24 and a low of whatever, 14, 15. That's just fine by me for late August here.
I have a question for you, just because, we're in the quote-unquote dog days of summer, and there is some sports that are going on. Of course, the Blue Jays games, they're on basically every night. But for us in the Mountain Time Zone and the Pacific Time Zone, I mean, they're relatively early in the evening, 4 o'clock in the afternoon or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. You've got some preseason football. But are you someone that uses this time to kind of, watch other things?
Sometimes, yeah. And I mean, not like on a dedicated basis where I have this list. Oh, and I got to binge all these shows and catch up on all these movies I haven't seen. But, if there's a chance to branch out a little bit and watch something else, I'll take it.
I mean, like a lot of our listeners, obviously they're listening to us because they're big sports fans. And, our jobs is to watch sports basically 24/7 throughout the year, especially when hockey season starts. The only reason I ask this is because, Sunday I watched Godzilla vs. Kong, which I'm not going to recommend for our listeners if you haven't seen it. There is something called there's a robot Godzilla that comes up at some point, and
that's just making me want to watch it more.
Okay, well, if you want to waste 2 hours of your day, go for it. Go for it. I watch Big Brother because it's something to watch, during the summer and whatever. It is what it is, television-wise. It's terrible, but it's still fun. But I actually watched Malice in the Palace last night.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and I know you've watched it, right?
Yes, I have.
First of all, I loved just hour documentaries. I thought it was fantastic because I thought I was going to be in for a series or a 2.5 hour thing. Really informative. Ron Artest, you learned a lot about him, obviously, kind of what he was going through with his mental health struggles. And I know he's been on 650 talking about Malice in the Palace and all this as well. But it was you learned a lot about a couple of guys that, when the incident happened, came across very poorly. And it was how the media targeted them and how it was all on them, and how ESPN skewed the narrative and the video evidence of what was actually happening at the time. And it was really neat to hear from those guys, Jermaine O'Neal, Steven Jackson, and Ron Artest, and good to have Reggie in there as well. But it was really interesting to just hear their side of things and how they felt things went down.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the documentary. It's the kind of thing, I said this last week when Scotty and I were chatting about it, I remember the incident pretty well, but it's just such a mind-blowing event that any kind of chance to revisit it and hear from the principals involved is always going to be entertaining, right? And that certainly was entertaining. It's the kind of thing you still almost can't believe that it went down exactly like it did.
Well, and I totally forgot you remember the moment of it when it happened because it was such a significant turn in the NBA. And obviously, it's one of those moments, as Jim Gray said in the documentary. If you haven't watched it, it's on Netflix. It's one of those moments you're always going to talk about, right? There's no glossing over it and kind of putting it in, the back burner. But I forgot how good that Pacers team was and how much, how they lost to the Pistons in 2004. And Reggie said he was ever going to win that series. It was going to beat the Lakers, and the Pistons ended up winning the title. And then I forgot the expectations on this Pacers team and the fact it was Reggie's last year.
Yeah, that he was a Pacers legend, right, retiring, and that subtext to the whole thing and the context. Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, as I said, I consider it something that I remember pretty clearly, but there's still bits and pieces of context and history that you forget, and it was good to kind of have your memory jogged watching it.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyways, I just wanted to bring that up because this is the time of year where you kind of, if there's stuff you want to watch, it's kind of a good time to watch it. Let's just set up the show quickly for our listeners. In about 30 minutes' time, Jason Sobel with the Action Network is going to talk a little golf. I watched the majority of the final round yesterday. Of course, the Northern Trust final round was pushed from Sunday through to Monday. Tony Finau got back in the winner circle, I guess we could say. Jamie, he beat Cameron Smith in a playoff at the Northern Trust. What is it? Almost 2,000 days since his last title, and he's been close. Like, this is the thing with Tony Finau. He's been in a couple of playoffs this season already. Specifically, I can remember the Genesis Open where he lost to Max Homa, but he seems like one of the good guys on the tour as well, but also someone that I don't really know a lot about.
Well, and with Finau, as you said, he's been close a lot. It was never really a question of can he win. I mean, I know when you go that long without victories, there's going to be fans and viewers who start to question, do you have that kind of killer instinct on Sunday? But Finau, I mean, he's one of the best golfers on tour, right? Mm-hmm. Certainly, he is way too talented to go that long between wins. And you're right, does seem like a really good guy. I've even seen people say, he never let the questions about the streak get to him or the losing streak, I guess you could call it. He never let those questions get to him, always stayed positive. And it felt good to see him finally get over in a big spot too, right? In the first round. No, it's not a major or anything, but it's still the first stage of the FedEx Cup playoffs. So that was really good to see yesterday from Tony Finau.
Like, I want him to win because, I don't want that narrative to be always like, when is he going to win? But when Cameron Smith on the first playoff hole hit that his tee shot out of bounds, I was like, okay, Tony, like, just step up and hit it in the middle of the fairway. This one is yours, because he had to hit a provisional. And I'm like, I'm kind of cheering for Tony Finau to get that. I wasn't cheering for Cameron Smith to be bad necessarily, but it was one of those ones where it's like, yeah, okay, Tony, this is yours. Don't screw it up.
Yeah, he's the sentimental favorite in that scenario. No doubt about it.
Exactly. Second hour of the show, little NFL fantasy football chat with Yahoo Sports' Matt Harmon. If you haven't had your draft yet or are curious who to take, Matt will hopefully have the answers for you. Jamie, have you had your fantasy football draft yet?
I have not yet. I have not done it yet. I prefer to do it late. I know some people do it, before preseason, before training camps even open. I never agree with that. I like to do it as close to the season as possible, so you have as much information as possible.
I know he's not here, but we can still kind of poke fun at him. But doesn't Scotty have like a rookie draft in April or May?
Yeah, something like that. Now, to be fair to Scotty, he also doesn't like that. That's just the rules of that league. He has a problem with it too. But yeah, it's completely ridiculous.
Yeah, and he's in a couple of drafts, like dynasty drafts or leagues and all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to get back into fantasy football this year. I'm hoping to join the Sportsnet 650 draft. Looking forward to doing that. I'm going to use it as like show prep because the more you follow fantasy football, the more you actually find out about the league. But I'm looking forward to it, getting back.
Also, I would say, Karen, given how incompetently run the 650 league has been in years past, don't get too excited. Don't get your hopes up that much. That's all I'll say.
So it's basically like the team you draft is the team you're stuck with?
Well, I don't know. It's okay. There's been lots of complaints around the office about the league. That's all I'll say. I'll leave it at that.
Well, I'm a type A personality, so maybe I should take over leading this draft.
Go for it.
We also locked this interview down, actually, coming up in the third hour of the show. Former NHLer and Stanley Cup champion and newly named head coach of the OHL's Windsor Spitfires, Marc Savard, is going to join the show, Jamie. When I saw this announcement, I thought, like, this is one of the... I'm just so happy for him. Just based on the
no doubt about it.
How his career ended and all the issues he had with concussions and all that stuff. Just to know his progression since then. I know he's talked openly about it and he's been coaching and doing other things. But to be named now the OHL Spitfires head coach, it's a pretty cool story.
Yeah, and Marc Savard, he's done analyst work on, I know, our sister station in Toronto, the Fan 590. He's been a frequent guest on this station, coached with the Blues for a little bit. So really excited to get Marc Savard on and just talk about, the opportunity that presented itself in the OHL, why it was the right fit for him, what he's looking forward to, and really get into that with him.
And also, too, these kids are going to hopefully have a normal season. I mean, the OHL didn't play last year, and I know they've come up with some restrictions. I have to go back and, check my memory on it, but I think there's some vaccination restrictions and all that kind of stuff, COVID restrictions. So just hoping to get pick his brain a little bit about that. Jamie, yesterday we did not talk, if any, about hockey. We know that's what our listeners want to talk about. Not much going on. And I guess still the biggest conversation out there is Will he be traded or won't he be traded?
Yeah.
Update on Jack Eichel? No update?
Yeah. Will he or won't he? And really, when will he is my biggest question, right? Because, there's still the lingering health issues, obviously, with Jack Eichel. He's going to want surgery when he goes to a new team. That pushes back when he can actually hit the ice with his new team. So I would think if I was one of the teams interested in acquiring his services, I would want to get this done ASAP, right? I would want it to be moving. Doesn't seem to be the Buffalo Sabres position, though. They seem to be content just to ride this one out for as long as possible. And it's kind of an interesting game of poker that's started here, right? With Kevin Adams holding the chips. And I don't know. I don't really know how it ends. I would still bet that he's traded kind of maybe just before training camp, early training camp, something like that. But Buffalo, so far, they have shown very, very little urgency to actually get a Jack Eichel deal done.
Well, because I think what Kevin Adams is saying, like, look, this is my ask and I want it. And the problem is, for Kevin Adams with this, is any team that may want him and teams that were associated with him early on, Minnesota says they're out. Rangers went a different direction. The Kings went a different direction, spent some money on Philip Deneau. And you look at any other teams that have been, quote-unquote, rumored with a Jack Eichel trade or could use a top-line center. Guess what? They're up against the cap. They got to move money out. And you think Kevin Adams is going to help any of these teams out by taking on money? I guess it depends what the sweeteners are.
Yeah, and it depends who the money is attached to, right? Because if it's attached to a useful player, okay, well then you can stomach it. If it's just pure dead money, then no, you're not going to be interested.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's I'm with you on the when. Can it be a Matt Duchene situation? But again, Matt Duchene at the time wasn't making $10 million in a flat cap era. Like it's one of those things where maybe Kevin Adams looks at this and says, like, look, we're going to be a bad team no matter what. Next year, we're not going to have our number one pick, Owen Power. He's going back to Michigan. Like, we're going to get probably a top 5, top 3 lottery pick if the ping pong balls fall our way. Like, do we just hold on to him and do it next year? Like, I mean, that's obviously going to piss the player off.
The problem is, though, that he has a no movement clause, which kicks in next summer, I believe, right? So, okay. I mean, right now, he has no control over the situation. But if you let it drag out all the way to next summer, then all of a sudden he does have control over the situation, right? And then you're really, really behind the 8 ball. If you're Buffalo, you're kind of screwed then. So you'd think they have to get it done before then. But the problem is, okay, we'll let it drag on into the season, let a team get desperate. But if he wants this surgery, and if you push it till November and he wants this surgery, it's going to be the new year before a team actually gets him on the ice. And how much value then does that have to whatever team is acquiring him? So I don't know. Right now, I am not convinced that Buffalo has played this perfectly. I think they might have overthunk it just a little bit here, but it remains to be seen. I mean, I know their asking price is sky high. Obviously, they are just crossing their fingers and hoping that someone will come to the table and meet that price, but I think they're going to have to come down. I think they're going to have to change what they are demanding a little bit to get this done.
I'm with you. I think it seems like a little bit like Ron Francis. Like the ask just continued to be the ask, and there was no wiggle room. And we saw what happened with Ron Francis, and how he was scrutinized for his handling of the the expansion draft. And this might be something Kevin Adams is thinking. Like, look, I gotta rethink my position because I don't want this hanging over my head for the entire season or even into training camp. But one of the teams that's always been kind of in conversation with Jack Eichel is the Calgary Flames. And because the Calgary Flames need an elite top center, a player like a Jack Eichel, he would fit perfectly, I think, on the Calgary Flames team. But the question is, you have to move some money out to get him. They do have some flexibility right now, but still there has to be other dollar figures moved. And do they have the pieces, quote unquote pieces, younger players, prospects, picks, whatever, that Buffalo is looking for? But that leads to a bigger conversation that we want to have this morning, Jamie. 960, 960, 650, 650. We want the listeners to really contribute to this morning because you and I, you came up with the idea. Like, let's talk about best and worst case scenarios for both franchises, because I think one of the worst case scenarios happened for both teams last year. Can we say that?
Yeah, pretty much. That was worst case. I mean, certainly for the Canucks, that's pretty much what a worst case scenario season looked like. And I mean, you could make a similar argument for the Flames as well.
Right, exactly. Like missing the playoffs in the direction they did, firing your head coach mid-season, underproduction from a core that they thought was going to take another step forward that they relied on. Again, for, Vancouver, I mean, COVID outbreak, and you lose the top line center.
Literally everything went wrong.
Yeah. So let's start with the Calgary Flames because because of the thing, like, best case scenario, well, you could get Jack Eichel and you don't lose too much and he becomes a top line center. I guess that could be considered into a best case scenario. But when you look at the Calgary Flames, Jimmy, what are a couple of things that you think need to happen in a best case scenario for them next season?
Well, yeah, and I don't want to be clear, get your text in 650, 650, 960, 960. Obviously, best case scenario for any NHL team is win the Stanley Cup. I understand that, but what we're talking about more is what specifically does it look like? What has to go right for the team to reach their best case scenario? And yeah, for the Flames, I mean, it's Jack Eichel. That's the best case scenario for this team, right? Is that they go out and acquire Jack Eichel. You just look at how the offseason has progressed. They've made some nice moves, but it doesn't amount to a whole lot. It's more window dressing. Yeah, even Blake Coleman at this stage of his career with that contract, he's going to be a contributor, but he's not a high-level impact player. That's the kind of player that this team has been crying out for, a Jack Eichel type, a legit, elite, all-star, number one center. They need Jack Eichel. This team needs a shakeup desperately. Brad Treliving has even said as much. And as you said, Karen, I understand, look, you might look at it and you say, do they really have the assets to do it? You got to find a way to get it done if it's at all possible, right? And the good thing about Calgary's situation when it comes to a Jack Eichel deal, I think, is there's nobody in that organization that should be off the table in trade talks for Jack Eichel, right? There's nobody that you look at and say, oh, well, we couldn't possibly give him up in a trade for Jack Eichel. Like Matthew Tkachuk is closest, but with all due respect to Matt Tkachuk, I mean, he's a winger, and he's just not the caliber of player that Jack Eichel is, right? So if you got to include Matthew Tkachuk to get Jack Eichel, you do it every day of the week, right? And, this is the best case for the Flames is trading for Jack Eichel, not just because of what a talented player he is and how desperately they've needed that type of player, but just because in general the team needs a shakeup so much, right? And I just think that running it back, if Brad Treliving just kind of dusts his hands off and says, okay, job done for the offseason, here's the team, let's go to work, it's going to basically feel like running back the same core again. And to me, it's going to feel like a missed opportunity to really shake things up. It's going to feel like a bit of a wasted season, to be honest. And I feel like you're just going to have the same risk of, if things don't go perfectly in your direction, you're going to end up on the outside looking into the playoffs, and you're going to be left at the same place next offseason, right? Saying, okay, what can we do to bring in a high-end talent? And now is the time. When I look at the Calgary Flames, I just say, okay, this is the time. Get it done. It's very rare that a player like Jack Eichel is available. Do whatever you have to do to get it done. That's the best case for the team, is going out and getting Jack Eichel.
And when I look at the worst case scenario, say you can't get Jack Eichel, you're stuck with what you have right now. And I guess best case with what you have right now is the core gets back to 2018-2019 season. The core gets back to even what we saw before the pandemic hit and in the bubble. The expectations take another step. But there's just so many questions about this team. Like, worst case scenario, Johnny Gaudreau doesn't sign a contract extension. He plays the entire season as a free agent and he leaves. Worst case scenario, Jacob Markstrom struggles with a workload that he's likely going to have. He's going to be really relied upon with this team because you look at their defense as well. Worst case scenario, the young defensemen in like Yusuf Valimaki, Rasmus Andersson, Oliver Shillington, like those guys are not able to take the next step to be everyday NHL players. What are you left with?
Yeah, and those are really good examples of potential ways that the season could go south for the Flames, Karen. I especially like the Jacob Markstrom example, right? Because, again, they did not invest at all in the backup goaltending position in a league where that's increasingly common, right? Where you want a guy who you feel comfortable can play, 25 games for you. That's not what they have in Calgary, right? They're, again, going to be asking Jacob Markstrom to play a big, big role to shoulder a big burden, and we've seen that doesn't always work out for Jacob Markstrom. We've seen it in both markets here, in Calgary and Vancouver, so that's a major risk. I would add to the potential downside, the worst-case scenarios for the Calgary Flames. What if Daryl Sutter's message and style starts to wear thin, right? He came in mid-season, gave the team a little bit of a boost, didn't revolutionize how they were playing or anything like that, but the team improved under Daryl Sutter. But we also know coaches like Daryl Sutter, that those really tough coaches, no one's ever going to call him a player's coach. They can be successful, but it's often over the short term, right? And if this team doesn't get off to a great start because they do have the same kind of stale core coming back, I just wonder, does Daryl Sutter get a little impatient because, he was hoping to coach a Stanley Cup contender? Do the players get a little impatient? Does that style start to wear thin? That's another big concern for me. And you just look at the future of that organization. If that happens, like if Daryl Sutter's not working out as the head coach there, that was kind of Brad Treliving's last coaching card to play. If it doesn't work out, I feel like the franchise is kind of going to be back to square one. They're going to be at a crossroads thinking, okay, what direction do we want to take this?
So that's the Calgary standpoint of things. And we'll get into it more in the show, like as we go along. Like, what are the more in-depth best and worst case scenarios for the Calgary Flames? But let's look at the Vancouver Canucks. And Jamie, I think when you look at my best case scenario, everyone is happy and healthy. Honestly.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a huge one. And I mean, happy might be even more important there than healthy. I mean, obviously health is important for every team. And, especially in the Canucks case where they were missing Elias Pettersson for a huge chunk of last year, it's extra important. But yeah, I like that you included happy there because that was one of the big narratives and storylines around the team last season, right? Was just no one was happy. No one was having fun. And you could probably say that about a bunch of teams in the NHL, given the COVID restrictions everyone was playing under, but it seemed especially pronounced in Vancouver. And we saw, first-year Canucks like Nate Schmidt, like Braden Holtby, basically immediately say, you know what, I don't want any part of this. Get me out of here. I'm done. I am not enjoying this. So that's a great call. Travis Green, the coaching staff, obviously winning is the first priority, but they got to find a way to make sure everyone is clicking, that the chemistry in the room is there, that people, are basically having fun, that they're happy.
Yeah, and it'd be interesting to ask those players, and you'd probably have to do it off the air, and maybe give them a couple beers and tell them, anonymity, and it's not going to be reported. But it would be interesting to know why those two players, specifically Holtby and Schmidt, found themselves so unhappy. Was it just coming to a new city in a COVID time? You couldn't experience it, and just couldn't, get the chance to see Vancouver, or even really get to know your teammates in a social setting, or was it something deeper? Like, that's what is always a question. Like, was it something deeper with this team? Look, JT Miller, he showed a ton of frustration last season, and it could have been, he's trying too hard, and he wants to win so bad, and so he was upset, frustrated with his own play. We saw Elias Pettersson show a ton of frustration on the bench, if not pouting tendencies at time, so there were times throughout the year that you're just like, if this team can get back to being smiles on the ice, it could take them a long way, because you know what, if there's smiles on the ice, it means the puck's going in the net, it means you're winning hockey games.
And with Schmidt and Holtby, I wonder if they looked at coming to the Canucks, and especially Nate Schmidt, who had just played them in the bubble in the series against Vegas, right? And they took them to 7 games, and he's probably thinking, hey, this is a young team on the upswing, I can go there, I can try to be part of the solution that takes them to the next level. And the exact opposite happens, right? You're losing a ton. You're sinking down the standings. You're going backwards. That would probably be a really frustrating experience, especially for veteran players like Braden Holtby and Nate Schmidt, who have been around a lot of winning teams in their time, right? So I can imagine all of a sudden going to a team that's just struggling to get out of the basement of the standings. That wouldn't be very fun. But I do wonder if there's more to it that if there was more going on behind the scenes that made the atmosphere around the Canucks just deeply unpleasant, as it seemed to be from the outside looking in last season.
It just looked like nobody had fun, and I mean, none of us in our lives have had fun a lot in the last year. I can only imagine what it was like living under those restrictions. But yeah, quickly, Jamie, just get your worst case scenario before we get to break here, and then we'll talk about it a little bit more in the second hour of the show.
Yeah, my worst case, I'll point at the blue line, and I know there's been a lot of debate in this market as they've kind of remade their defense in the offseason here. But I guess the way I would phrase it, worst case scenario is that the defense is as bad as the skeptics say it is. And I'll leave it there for now. But yeah, there is a lot of potential downside on that blue line. And I think that could be the team, or that could be what ultimately sinks this team's aspirations. But we'll get into it more later on in the show.
Yeah, I said basically OEL struggles. His underlying numbers are not great. And we continue to talk about how his contract is going to be a burden for the Canucks for years to come. We want to hear from you, though. 650, 650, 960, 960. Best case, worst case scenarios. But give us our best case, too. A lot of the texts come in are worst case scenarios. Like, let's hear. let's go on not the Debbie Downer side. Let's go the positive side, the house of positivity.
Really? Fans are being negative? I'm shocked. I'm shocked by this, Karen.
It's August 24th. Let's be positive, people. I mean, training camp's about a month away. Until we hit the ice, let's have some positive
You know
vibes.
what? No, look, I hear you. Get those positive texts in too. But you know what? If you're in a sour mood, if you're feeling down on the team, let those texts fly too. We're here for it. We're here for it all.
Fair enough. We will be your psychiatrist for the day. It took 1,975 days for Tony Finau to win another golf tournament. Jamie, Corey Connors impressed as well once again at the BMW Championship just around the corner. We're going to talk a little Northern Trust Golf, the PGA Tour next with Jason Sobel on Rintoul and Sermon. Jamie Dodd in for Scott Rintoul.
You're listening to Rintoul and Sermon.
This is Rintoul and Sermon. Jamie Dodd in for Scott Rintoul. Just to give our listeners a quick little update, Jamie, we're going to speak to Joe Reedy coming up in the third hour of the show, just after the top of the hour. He, of course, is Associated Press sports writer covering the Los Angeles Chargers. I know for you, that's one of the intriguing teams this heading into this NFL season. It is for me as well, because I think for me it all just like, what can Justin Herbert do in season 2, honestly? Yeah,
that's a massive question. He was such an incredible story in his rookie year, put up amazing numbers, looked awesome, and I'm really curious to get Joe Reedy's opinion on it. You know, what are reasonable expectations? Because the other interesting thing is, you know, so often when a rookie quarterback comes out and has that kind of exceptional season, you're thinking, okay, the head coach and the offensive coordinator are probably coming back, but they didn't in LA. They got fired, and there's new coaches in place there. So that's a really interesting dynamic to me, right? You already had this quarterback who exceeded all expectations in his rookie season. Now he's dealing with new coaches. Can they help him get to even another level? What's that going to look like in LA?
Yeah, it's so we're going to talk to Joe Reedy about that. Coming up in the third hour of the show, of course, Mark Savard, new head coach of the Windsor Spitfires, also in that hour. But we're going to talk a little golf right now, because the Northern Trust wrapped up on Monday after a deluge of water. Did you see like some of the pictures of them having to try and clean up that golf course to get it even ready for the golfers to play yesterday? Like, it was, I mean, the hurricane went through, right? So it's like, It was just ridiculous, the amount of rain that they got. Tony Finau, after he won, actually shook the hand of every single grounds crew member. Like, just thinking, like, thank you for getting us on the course, because their work was overtime, that's for sure. So he wins the Northern Trust, Tony Finau. He jumps to the head of the FedEx standings, Jamie. He was 23 last week, jumps to number 1. John Rahm, who had the lead until 15, he bogeyed 15, dropped down from he jumps up from 5 to number 2. Colin Morikawa, who was number 1, he drops to number 6. But the big story to this is the fact that 2 Canadians are moving on. So for those listeners that don't know, 130 were in this Northern Trust tournament. It's cut down to 70, the top 70 golfers in the FedEx Cup standings for the BMW Championship, and then the top 30 for the final championship at East Lake next week. So Mackenzie Hughes and Corey Connors both in the BMW Championship. But we're joined now by Jason Sobel of the Action Network. Jason, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. How are you guys doing?
We are doing a wonderful, thank you. I hope you enjoyed a Monday finish, another playoff finish on the PGA Tour this year. That seems to be the story down the stretch.
It has been crazy, all these final rounds. We've had delays. We're having these playoffs that aren't just like, well, playoffs. I mean, yesterday, okay, a 2-man playoff, and they played one hole and determined it. We've had like 8-hole playoffs. We've had 6 guys in a playoff. I mean, it's been a crazy summer for these finishes on the PGA Tour. It makes it a lot of fun to sit in front of the TV and watch them.
Absolutely. I got to ask you, though, about Tony Finau. He finally wins 1,975 days, if I'm correct, since his last victory on the PGA Tour, basically 5 years for him to get it. He's been close. We've seen him in a couple of playoffs this year. I mean, I specifically in my mind can think of the Genesis Open one against Max Homa. But what did you see from Tony Finau in this tournament, and specifically maybe yesterday in that back 9 that finally got him back to the winner's circle?
You know, I just think it was a matter of time. I think we just needed to let Tony Finau sort of grow into this. And I liken it to Phil Mickelson trying to win major championships. And right now, of course, we look back at Phil and say, wow, he's one of the more decorated major champions of the last half century. He's won 6 majors. He was always going to be great. Well, it took Phil until he was 32 years old. It took a whole lot of heartbreak and a whole lot of tough losses at major championships for him to get into the position where he was comfortable enough to win them. And for Tony Finau, it's been like that only at regular PGA Tour events where he's gotten into contention, he's gotten into the mix, he's had a chance and not been able to come home with the trophy. But I think the general public looks at those experiences as negatives, as, hey, he couldn't get it done and he must be discouraged. Tony spoke about it afterwards yesterday, said, no, those actually make you hungrier. Those sort of steal you for the moment moving forward in the future when you get into those positions again. And so I'm of the mind that anytime a player gets close to a title and doesn't win and has this heartbreaker, it's actually a positive. And I think most of the players would agree with that, and certainly it's helped Tony Finau moving along. And I think Tony's going to be a guy that we look at over the next 3, 4, 5 years as one of the best players in the world. He's got all the talent. I think he needed a little more confidence down the stretch. He needed a little more of that killer instinct. We saw that yesterday. Usually Tony's a fun, affable guy, smiling a lot on the golf course. He had that game face on yesterday, and that's, I think, what you like to see if you want to see him trying to win one down the stretch. So I thought it was great. The one thing that I've heard from some people already is, hey, maybe this will open up the floodgates, and I take a little offense to that just because we don't have floodgates anymore. There are no floodgates. We've had 48 PGA Tour events so far this season. We have 42 different winners. Nobody's won more than twice. So I think it's unfair to place those expectations on Tony Finau to think that he's going to win 4, 5, 6 times in the season because nobody's doing that.
I think that's a really good point, Jason. I want to ask you a little bit more about, why we've seen so many unique winners on tour this season. But just quickly on Finau, I totally take your point. Okay, expecting this run of victories is probably not realistic, but do you see it as something that could kind of springboard him next season, into serious contention at the majors or into 1 or 2 more high-profile victories, even if we don't see, as you say, the quote-unquote floodgates really open?
There's no doubt. He has a game that is made for major championships. He hits the ball a long way. He hits it, for the most part, pretty straight. Hits his irons, not just long, but hits them high. That's what I like to see from players who can attack flag sticks on fast greens at major championships. It comes down to the putting for Tony. He putted great yesterday during that final round, but that hasn't always been the case. If his putter is just warm, it doesn't need to be red hot. If his putter is just warm, Tony Finau can go out there and win a PGA Tour event. And so I do think he's going to start contending more at major championships. I think he's got a great chance to win one not too far down the road. And really what I like from him and what I always say that separates the upper echelon, the very top tier of golfers in the world from the next tier, is that the top tier can win at any course, any time, any place around the world. And I do think that's the case with Finau. I do think that you take him to any of the 4 major championships, Masters, PGA, U.S. Open Championship, and he's got a chance to win on any given week. And so I do think that helps separate him from maybe that next tier of player.
You mentioned earlier 42 different winners on the tour this season. Is that just simply a reflection of the amount of talent that's on the tour right now? What's going on there? Why have there been so many different winners? And as you also say, nobody has been able to win more than twice this season.
Yeah, I wish I had a great answer. The easy answer, I think, is just, hey, there's a lot of really good players, and, they're all getting their chance to go through that turnstile, so to speak, and go pick up a trophy. So that's the easy answer. I think, sometimes the easiest answer is the right answer, and I don't know that that's necessarily there's anything wrong with that. But I wonder if at some point maybe complacency sneaks in a little bit. Maybe these guys are making so much money that once you get that victory, you're like, all right, look, I'm good for a while, and I can kind of rest up a little bit and wait for something else. I don't know. My guess is that if we ask all the PGA Tour players, the 42 players who have won this season, if they're feeling complacent and they've got enough money and don't feel like they need another victory, they'd all say, no, of course not. That's definitely not the case. But at some point, you wonder whether, these guys, it's a long season. This is a 50-event season, the longest PGA Tour season that we've had since 1975. And so I think that exhaustion plays a lot into this, both physically and mentally. We've seen it down the stretch. I mean, no 54-hole leader has won since Phil Mickelson at the PGA Championship 14 events ago. And I think a large part of that is due to the fact that these guys are playing so much, they're worn down, they're tired, and it's really tough to focus for 4 straight rounds, especially if you get up in that lead on Thursday and then Friday like Jon Rahm was this past week. and Russell Henley the week before, it's really difficult to keep it going for a full 4 days. And so I think that plays a large part into it. But again, the easiest answer is probably just there are 20, 30, 40 really, really talented players out there right now, and they're all getting their chance to go through that turnstile.
We're speaking with Jason Sobel here on Rintoul and Sermon. Jamie Dodd in for Scott Rintoul. Jason, I want to talk to you about Jon Rahm because it's been a really interesting, I think, is probably the easiest word to use season for him. I mean, he goes from, testing positive for COVID twice, the craziness of him getting pulled off the course after that massive lead in the third round, and then he goes on to win the U.S. Open, his first major. Yesterday, he had the lead, as you said, after the third round. He had the lead until the 15th hole. He got that bogey. He got a little heated, too, and we haven't seen that from him, probably because things have been going pretty well. Is he still the overall best golfer right now on the tour?
I think there's no doubt about it. I think Jon Rahm is the number one player in the world for a reason. He's the best player in the game right now. And it's funny because it's easy to look back after he didn't finish off that tournament yesterday the way he would have liked to. But twice last week I asked John about the fact that he hadn't played golf. He went 32 days between competitive rounds, and so he was more well-rested than anybody else in the field. I asked him if that was going to be an advantage. I asked him before the opening round. He said, no, I think it'll be an advantage maybe the second week of the FedEx Cup playoffs. The third week, certainly, when we get to Atlanta and these guys are really tired, I've maybe got my legs under me a little bit and have a little more gas in the tank. So I think that could be the case. Then I asked him again basically the same question on Friday afternoon after he took the second round lead. I said, now are you seeing it? Now do you see, like, you're walking around, you see some of these guys that are a little more tired than you, that don't have as much in the tank? And he said, no, you know what? I'm still sticking with it. I still think that my advantage is going to come over the next couple of weeks. So if you're looking to, if you're playing in a pool, looking to bet, looking to play fantasy, whatever you're doing, and you're looking to pick a guy over the next few weeks, I know it's really easy to say, hey, I like Jon Rahm. He's the best player in the world, and I think he's going to play well. But he's the best player in the world. I think he's going to play well over the next couple of weeks. And I think a large part of that is due to that sort of involuntary absence that he had from the PGA Tour over a month. And I think that it could lead to him having an edge over a lot of his fellow competitors over the next couple of weeks.
Jason, I do want to talk to you about the Canadians that have made it to the BMW Championship, Corey Connors, Mackenzie Hughes, but I want to stick with Jon Rahm because he is the defending champion of the BMW Championship. We saw that crazy finish last year with those crazy long-distance putts from Dustin Johnson and Jon Rahm at Olympia Fields. But this one's a little different, this course. It's at Caves Valley Golf Course in Baltimore. How does this course set up for some of these golfers? Like, who's the best chance on these courses?
Yeah, it's a great question because these players have never played this golf course, at least as professionals. Now, I went and spoke with a few players last week who had played it back in the 2007 Palmer Cup. Denny McCarthy is a native of Maryland. I thought maybe he'd know the golf course. Say he's played there 2 or 3 times and nothing in the last decade or so. So I didn't get a whole lot of intel, but what they all knew about it, what they all remembered was it's a big, long, northeast golf course that is going to be imperative on driving it long and driving it straight. So I'm looking at the guys who hit it a long way. Now, granted, a lot of the world's best players, the way it's set up right now, the game's best players all hit it a long way. You can't really find a guy in the top 10, top 15, top 20 in the world ranking right now who isn't a guy that averages 300 per drive, other than maybe a Webb Simpson here and there. So for the most part, the good players should be set up for a big week this week. I know a lot of people like Bryson DeChambeau. He's not at the top of my list. I look at Dustin Johnson this week, and I know he hasn't played great golf over the last few weeks. He's missed the cut in 2 of his last 3 starts. But when I think big, long, northeast golf course with bent grass greens, I think of Dustin Johnson winning at Oakmont. I think of him winning at Firestone. I think of him winning multiple playoff events over the years in the Northeast. I think this should set up really, really well for him. But as far as Rahm can win any place, anytime. And like I said, I think he's trending in the right direction where he's going to have a little more in the tank than some of his fellow competitors the next couple of weeks.
You know, Jason, as you mentioned earlier in the interview, one of the stories, certainly recently on tour, has been guys breaking through after long droughts or breaking through for the first time with Tony Finau, Abraham Ancer recently as well. Is there a guy you think could be next on that list, you know, possibly as early as this weekend at the BMW Championship?
Yeah, I'll give you a few possibilities. Scotty Scheffler has moved up to top 20 in the world without having won on the PGA Tour, and I think he's got a great chance. He's a guy that I like almost every time he tees it up, and this is another course that I think should play well for him. And I like, again, we're talking about the exhaustion of players at this time of year, and the 49th of 50 events this season. I don't mind going after a guy who's in his early 20s who maybe has a little more juice left than some of the guys that are close to twice his age. So I think Scotty Scheffler is a nice candidate to get that first victory. Louis Oosthuizen, of course, won the 2010 Open Championship, but he has not won a PGA Tour event since then, and he's never won on U.S. soil, which is still one of the crazier stats ever. He's got 7 runner-up finishes at major championships. He's played well everywhere. He just can't break through for that next victory on U.S. soil, that first victory on U.S. soil, which is crazy. He lives here now. He lives in Florida, and he hasn't won here in the U.S., but I could see Louis Oosthuizen playing well. He has had to withdraw from his last 2 potential starts, so we'll see if he's healthy going into this one, but if he is, he's got a chance. And then if you want a total dark horse, Cameron Tringali is another guy who's played well, I believe, finished 26th or better in 5 of his last 6 starts, so trending nicely. I don't know that he's ready to step it up and win in a field that's necessarily this good, but he could have a good week as well.
As Karen mentioned also, Jason, you know, a couple of Canadians going to figure into the tournament. They were able to advance after the Northern Trust. The highest ranked one is Corey Connors, who had that incredible third round at the Northern Trust, ends up at 20th in the FedEx Cup standings going into this weekend's event. What are you seeing from Corey Connors' game right now? And as you say, is he kind of one of those guys who might be ready to take the next step and challenge for the leaderboard this weekend?
Yeah, at 20th, by the way, Corey Connors isn't exactly a lock to make the Tour Championship, but he's pretty close. Things would really have to be kind of strange for Corey Connors to not make it to Atlanta, and there's a lot of really good things that come with making it to Atlanta, including inclusion in all of the major championships next year. That might not be something that Corey was worried about anyway because of his world ranking being high enough, but it's always nice to kind of have that in the bank. So I think Connors is a terrific player. He's one of the world's elite ball strikers, and very much like some of the other elite ball strikers. Colin Morikawa is a prime example. He's going to hit it well on any given week. It's a matter of, again, his putter just needs to be warm. It doesn't necessarily need to be red hot, but if Corey Connors can putt a little bit better than the field average, he can contend. And that's essentially what he did for a few rounds last week. He kind of lost a little bit at the end, but he's a guy that, like I said, his tee to green game is fantastic. I would put it up there in the top 10 in the world, if not maybe even the top 5 in the world. Just comes down to that flat stick, that 14th club in the bag. If he can figure that out on any given week, he can go out and contend with the world's best players. As far as Mackenzie Hughes, he's almost the opposite. If you could make a Corey Connors, Mackenzie Hughes sort of combination player, he might be one of the best players in the world. He might challenge John Rahm for number 1. Mackenzie Hughes is one of my favorite guys to watch putt, especially on fast greens. He's really good on fast greens. We saw that earlier this year at Torrey Pines for the U.S. Open, and of course at Kiowa as well. Played both of those really, really well on fast greens. So he's a guy that as long as he gets there, as long as he puts himself in position, doesn't have the ball striking skills of Corey Connors, but if he gets there, he can roll in putts in bunches. So, again, if you combine those two players, one Canadian super player, I would love that guy.
Jason, I got to ask you quickly about the health of Patrick Reed, because he withdrew from the Northern Trust with an ankle issue, but he's also been hospitalized now with double pneumonia. He obviously won't play this weekend, but is there an update on how serious this is, or is he on the road to recovery?
Yeah, all we've heard so far is what we've gotten from Reed's camp, and really I think most of it's coming from his wife, Justine, who said, look, he's been in the hospital. He won't be healthy enough to play this week. We hope that he'll be able to come back soon. I think it probably hurts his Ryder Cup chances a lot, considering he's now had to withdraw from 3 straight events for various injuries and ailments. So I know that means so much to him, and I'm sure he's going to try to come back if he can and if he qualifies for it at next week's Tour Championship. But that's asking a lot, I think, coming off of this. We hope that he recovers and becomes healthy and, is able to get back as soon as he can. But this is really bad timing for Patrick Reed, a guy who is so intent on playing for the U.S., putting on that red, white, and blue, that at a moment's notice, just a few weeks ago when Bryson DeChambeau couldn't play in the Olympics, Patrick Reed jumped on a plane, headed over to Tokyo to go take his spot. So he wants to be on the Ryder Cup team. I just don't know that Steve Stricker, the U.S. captain, is going to be able to put him on so soon after having what is this bilateral pneumonia, which doesn't sound very good moving forward.
No, it doesn't. I should correct myself. He withdrew from the Wyndham Championship last week with that ankle injury. And just quickly before you let you go, Bryson DeChambeau has accepted an invitation to compete in the Professional Long Drivers Association World Championships on September 27th. He says he's doing it to put more spotlight on the event and on the world of golf. Your thoughts with Bryson entering this championship?
Yeah, why not? It's fun. As long as, I'd like to hope that Bryson isn't going to completely change around his game and, try to swing extra hard in preparation for it, because he's got a little event called the Ryder Cup, which he is now qualified for, which is the week before, just a few days before this long drive championship. And so he's a guy that swings hard at it anyway. And so I don't think it's going to really affect him much. Look, it brings some exposure to the long drive community. Bryson needs some good pub right now. He's not talking to the press. He's had some issues with us. We've had some issues with him, not me personally, but there is some dissension and a lot of noise around Bryson over the past 6 months or so. And so, look, if this is something that he wants to do, something he thinks will be fun, something that might generate some good PR for him, I'm all for it.
Awesome. Well, hey, Jason, thanks so much for your time today. Really appreciate the insight. Enjoy the BMW Championship and then the championship at East Lake next week.
Thanks so much. You too.
Awesome. That's Jason Sobel with the Action Network. Jamie, just before we get to break, 1 hour in the books, there's some breaking news coming down from the BC government. This is not sports news, but just want to let our listeners know. BC has just reinstated mandatory masks for all indoor public places, ages 12 and up, starting tomorrow.
Yeah, not a big surprise given where case counts are going and heading into the fall, hoping to get kids back in schools and all of that. But yeah, as you say, kind of breaking news just coming out during that interview that we are back to the public masks mandates. Yep,
enjoy those masks. Go pick them up once again if you did get, for whatever reason, rid of yours.
I hope you were able to get some on clearance, because I noticed in a lot of stores they were like kind of a blowout sale. Oh, we're not going to need these anymore. Well, if you were smart, you picked some up.
Yeah, I've been using one of those reusable ones for a little while. It's starting to smell a little bit, so I think I'm going to have to
Gotta throw that in the wash there, Karen.
Yes, have to throw it into the wash. But this just in, the BC government is re-implementing mask mandate to all indoor public settings. That is starting tomorrow. 1 hour in the books, second hour to come. Jamie, let's get back into best and worst case scenarios for the Vancouver Canucks and the Calgary Flames, because we've got a couple submissions coming into the inboxes, but I want to get more from the listeners. 650, 960, 960. And I'm getting called out for one of my submissions, so we'll get to that next. You're listening to Rintoul and Sermon on the Sportsnet Radio Network. Well, we've come a long way from the 80s, but those huge, uplifting, crowd-pleasing tracks never get old, and if you listen to my playlist, they never do. You'll find songs like that on the Headliners playlist on Apple Music, plus more fist pumpers and rock anthems. Listen to the Headliners playlist on Apple Music.
Now back to Rintoul and Sermon.
One of my favorite songs by the Rolling Stones, Start Me Up. Playing that one, Jamie, because Rolling Stones drummer Charlie Watts died today at the age of 80. So I just want to play a song by them and rest in peace to Charlie Watts. Fan of the Stones?
Huge Stones fan, absolutely. Yeah? I was driving around listening to Exile on Main Street just yesterday, I believe.
Awesome. I don't know what that means, but
it's one of their albums. In my opinion, one of their best albums.
I'm not a big Stones fan. I like songs. Like I like "Start Me Up's probably one of my favorite songs to listen to, but it's like They don't really have the catalog to draw from. So thank you for letting our listeners know.
My pleasure, Karen.
Yeah, I mean, I like 80s music, but they're not exactly. I'm more of a Whitesnake.
Well, they were releasing music in the 80s, but not their best. Not their best music, no.
No, they weren't, that's for sure. That's a little after their prime stuff, so rest in peace to Charlie Watts. Just a couple of updates quickly that I saw come in, Jamie. The Edmonton Oilers, their OEG group, the Edmonton Oilers, whatever it is, they finally announced today, just like the Calgary Flames did yesterday, that to enter Rexall Place to watch Oilers games next season, just like the Flames at McMahon Stadium, you will have to be double vaccinated. Also, good news coming from the BC Lions yesterday. Farhan Lalji did tweet out the fact that no positive cases from their recent round of testing for the BC Lions. Of course, they were the last team to play the Edmonton Elks, who are now up to 9 positive cases.
Yeah, so the word we got from Dave Campbell yesterday and from other reporters around the CFL was that, the Lions weren't particularly worried. They didn't think they'd been in close contact with anyone, so they were hopeful, and good to see at least early confirmation that that's true, right? That they seem like they're going to be able to, come out of that game against Edmonton without any positive cases. So far, anyways. Knock on wood.
Yeah, knock on wood. Good news because the Lions play the Red Blacks in Ottawa on Saturday. Jamie, we got into the first hour and some pretty good submissions into both inboxes, 960, 960, 650, 650, talking about the best and worst case scenarios for the Calgary Flames. And I think you and I both agreed that last year was the worst case scenario for both teams. And I think if you're to, in a general sense, maybe not have worst case scenario be that brutal for the teams. But I think worst case scenario is it's kind of status quo and both teams are out of the playoffs in a Pacific Division that you could probably argue that third spot could go to one of 4 teams. And 2 of those teams should be the Calgary Flames and the Vancouver Canucks.
Yeah, it should be. Both teams, the expectation should be to make the playoffs, right? Now, it might not be possible, depending on how the Central Division shakes out and how the top of the Pacific Division shakes out, that both teams do, in fact, make the playoffs. But that should be the expectation. That should certainly be the goal for both teams going into this year.
Absolutely. So we talked a lot about the Calgary Flames off the top and kind of quickly got into the Vancouver Canucks. So we'll talk a little bit more about the Vancouver Canucks right now. But again, do get your submissions in. 960, 960, 650, 650. This one came in from Minor Matt in Abbotsford. Best case scenario, the Canucks follow the plan. Worst case scenario, the Canucks follow the plan. And again, Matt, if you know what the plan is with the Vancouver Canucks, send it our way. But hey, when I look at the best case scenario for the Vancouver Canucks, I said everyone's happy and healthy, but if you want to look a little bit more in depth to the roster, Jamie, look, Elias Pettersson is signed. He comes back healthy. He's happy. He regains his game form that we saw in his rookie year, that we saw in the second year leading up to the COVID break and the bubble. We don't see the Elias Pettersson we saw last year leading to the injury. And I also made the point too, I think best case scenario for the Vancouver Canucks is Jason Dickinson fills that 3C role. That gives the ability to have JT Miller move up back to the Lotto line, because when we saw the Lotto line firing on cylinders when they were all healthy a couple of seasons ago, they're one of the more dynamic lines in the NHL.
They are, and it's a good point about Jason Dickinson, and I would point to kind of the forward group in general, right? If you're kind of trying to craft, okay, if for the Canucks to reach their absolute ceiling, what are all the things that have to go right? The forward group has to be a major strength of this team, and that starts, at the top with the Lotto line, but it's the other lines as well. And you make a really good point about Jason Dickinson. He gives them something they have not had really in Travis Green's tenure, which is a legit, very strong, defensive-minded third-line center, right? He can really, really go into those matchups against other teams' top lines and hold his own. Brandon Sutter hasn't been able to do that the last few years. Adam Gaudette, not that type of players. You look at some of the other guys they've tried in the bottom 6, they've never had that legit shutdown option. And, Jason Dickinson, he's not going to be a Selke Trophy winner or anything like that, but he can do the job in that third-line spot. And you hope it frees up not just the Lotto line, but I would look at Bo Horvat's second line as well. Bo Horvat has had to shoulder the load of a ton of those tough matchups in recent years, right? Him and Tanner Pearson, often with Louis Eriksson on their line, because they were playing those defensive minutes, they kind of got burdened with him there as well. This should theoretically free Bo Horvat, and we'd think, Connor Garland is going to ride shotgun with him. Maybe Niels Höglander is there as well. Whatever the combination, though, is, whoever's playing with Bo Horvat should be able to be much more offensively focused this year, which I actually think fits Horvat's game better. I know there's always he has this kind of reputation as this two-way player, but defensively the results haven't really been there for Horvat. So freeing him up to do more on the offensive end, that's a huge addition for the team.
Another thing that, if we're going to stick with the forward line too, and you talked about the forward group as a whole, like best case scenario, Vasily Podkolzin comes in as an everyday NHL player and holds his own. Right? Like, we saw Niels Holgander get a shot in training camp, and he held his own for the most part, and hopefully he can take the next step. But I think if you're thinking best case scenario, the kid can come over and he plays a very... He fits, his game translates, from the KHL to the NHL very well. I think best case scenario, Vasily Podkolzin is in the starting lineup night one and continues to be, when we're looking ahead to January, February.
Well, I would say even with Vasily Podkolzin, I think best case scenario, you got to aim higher than hold his own, right? I mean, I think best case scenario is do what Niels Höglander did last year, which was more than hold his own. He came in and he was an impact player for this Canucks team. He was one of their most consistent, productive forwards for much of the season. And now, again, is that a fair expectation to put on Vasily Podkolzin? No, but I think best case scenario for Podkolzin is probably a lot closer to that. If he comes in and he's just a guy and it's okay, he's your ninth best forward. He's hanging on the third line. Maybe finishes with 10 goals, 10 assists, something like that. That's fine. That's not a reason to panic. But it's also, I wouldn't call that best case scenario. I think there's a higher ceiling there for Podkolzin, even in his first year in the NHL.
This text comes in, Canucksville Inc. This is best case scenario. Canucksville Inc. Pettersson and Hughes to fair bridge deals. The D-Corps will prove the doubters wrong. OEL will be much improved, and the Canucks will get 60 to 70% of his contract value, shocking the industry as a whole, with the exception of the Toronto market, who simply won't notice. And the other additions will be full value, including Tucker Poolman, who the market actually pegged to be a $2.5, $2.6 million contract per year. He says it's August. Why not think of the positives? When it comes to the blue line, and someone said, when I said worst case scenario, it was Oliver Ekman-Larsson doesn't play well, and we're talking about his contract being an albatross for this team for years to come. I mean, best case scenario is he does prove the doubters wrong, and he comes into a new fresh lease on life, new system. It's not the Rick Tocchet system. Who knows how he can fit into Travis Green? And yeah, we don't talk about the contract situation from day one.
Yeah, that's a good way of looking at the Oliver Ekman-Larsson thing, right? Is just best case scenario is we're talking not about his contract, but we're talking about how he's helping the team, right? Because when you do look, it's almost impossible for him to live up to his contract, right? Just you look at the term and the value left on it, that's not happening. It's never going to feel like you're getting a good bargain deal on Oliver Ekman-Larsson. But the hope is that he can do enough on the ice that the contract isn't killing you, right? That's the kind of best case scenario upside that you say, look, okay, we're overpaying him, but at least he's a legitimate top four defenseman for us. At least he's eating a lot of those tough minute matchups. At least he's, carrying a pairing with Tucker Poolman or whoever his partner ends up being. Because when we were sketching this out, okay, what needs to go right for the Canucks to reach their ceiling? What are the potential worst case scenario downfalls for the Canucks? For me, looking at the worst case, it starts with the blue line. And there was a ton of criticism made at the Canucks as they kind of reshaped their defense this offseason. I think a lot of it was fair. I think there's a tremendous amount of risk with Oliver Ekman-Larsson. I was pretty critical of the Tucker Poolman deal. I was on air on Free Agent Frenzy Day when it came down. I was really surprised that they gave him 4 years. I'm not sure he's a legit top four guy. I think you even look at returning players like Travis Hamonic, Tyler Myers. There's a lot of downside potential with those players as well. And that's not to say that it's a guarantee that it's going to be a disaster. As you say, you can build a case for Oliver Ekman-Larsson taking a step forward and regaining some of his form. You can imagine it, but I just think if we, fast forward to April, right, and if we're doing an autopsy of another Canucks season where they finished outside of the playoffs, the most likely culprit is going to be that the defense just didn't work, right? That despite all of the new pieces, they didn't live up to expectations. And as I said in the first segment, that the skeptics were right. The skeptics were correct to say, hey, wait a second, this defense is not going to get it done.
When you look at what the worst case scenario is for the Vancouver Canucks, and I just want to point out, I don't even want to really even touch on the goaltending because I just think it's going to be a best case scenario for the Canucks. I do think that Thatcher Demko is going to continue on the trajectory that he has been, and I don't think, worst case scenario, he gets hurt and things go south from there. But I didn't want to throw that out into the universe. But Jamie, I look at what one of the worst case scenarios could be for this team, and it was what I talked about off the top with them being happy, because I think we've consistently seen this team get off to struggling starts and kind of behind the eight ball at certain points in different seasons. And I think for this team, especially after trying to prove the doubters wrong, Jim Benning, with, all the transactions and free agent signings and trades and whatever that he made this offseason to revamp this roster, which needed to be revamped, if the team gets off to a struggling start, I think that's one of the worst case scenarios, just because the narrative will be, okay, well, here we go again.
It's going to be a kick in the gut. There's no doubt about it. And again, just kind of zoom out from a franchise organizational perspective. I mean, you remember how heated things got here in Vancouver. What was it, kind of late January, early February, when the season was already sliding off the rails, right? And all of the conversation was about, is Jim Benning going to get fired? To the point where Francesco Aquilini had to come out and make a statement on Twitter saying, hey, stop talking about this. I'm not going to fire Jim Benning. That conversation is coming back, though, right? Yeah. If there's another slow start, again, the conversation is going to be, okay, who's getting fired? Is it Travis Green or is it Jim Benning, right? That's what the conversation is immediately going to go to, because Jim Benning has been here for so long. Travis Green now going into his 5th year as the Canucks head coach. So you're right. If all of these changes that they've made and the new additions, if they don't click early, that's immediately going to become the talking point in Vancouver. And as we've seen, once that temperature gets ratcheted up here in Vancouver, it's really, really hard to kind of calm the market down. It's going to be very, very difficult to get things back on track from that point.
Yeah, this season fans can be a lot more vocal. They just don't have to buy a plane and a banner to go around.
They can go to the arena and boo.
Exactly.
We hope that'll be the case, but yeah.
Or have some chants going like we saw in the past. And I do think, too, you look at it, where the trajectory of this fans being back in the stands and whether or not it's full capacity at Rogers Arena, but there will be some revenue coming in. And you could point to the fact that, Jim Benning was given an extra season, not fired last year, or given at least more time, because of the fact Francesco Aquilini didn't want to have to pay someone to not be here. But when you're getting revenue back, it makes it a little more palpable to pay someone to not be on the roster. So I think the narrative around this Canucks definitely has to be positive to start the season. Calgary Flames, I wanted to ask you about this, because when I look at best case scenario, and we talked about, adding Jack Eichel. But in the case that doesn't happen, best case scenario with what they have on their roster right now. This roster is what they dress opening night. I mean, best case scenario for me is they can put the puck in the net next season. But I do have questions with that based on what we did see. Daryl Sutter, he used to use it's a 2-1 league, and then he changed it to it's a 3-2 league. The problem with the Calgary Flames last season was, 2.77 goals per game, which is under that three goals per game that Daryl Sutter says you need to win hockey games nowadays. So best case scenario, Matthew Tkachuk, Sean Monahan, Andrew Mangiapane, who else? Blake Coleman, Elias Lindholm. These guys can start to put the puck in the net. Consistency, but when you look at how Daryl Sutter likes to play, I just wonder if that is actually something that can happen.
It's going to be a struggle. Now, I do think they'll be able, at least with Daryl Sutter, you feel pretty good about the defensive side of things from a team perspective. I know there are questions on the Flames blue line, right, about some of the young players and who's going to be in what role, but you do at least like the odds that a Daryl Sutter team will be able to defend and keep the puck out of its own net. I would look, okay, let's say they do run back this team, but just the same roster. I think best case scenario is, can two out of the three of Gaudreau, Monahan, and Tkachuk have great years, right, at the same time? Because I look at it, the last time that happened, the last time all three of those players clicked in the same year was the 2018-2019 season, where they finished first in the Western Conference, right? If all three of those guys are clicking, that has the potential to be an extremely good team, but we just haven't seen it consistently, certainly from Gaudreau and Monahan since then. Matthew Tkachuk didn't have nearly as impactful a year as we're used to seeing last year, so it really rests to me on the shoulder of those three guys. And if I had to rank who's most likely to have an exceptional season, I'd probably go Tkachuk, then Gaudreau, then Monahan. I'm not as high on Monahan's game as certainly a lot of people used to be in Calgary, and I know there's a lot of frustration with him now, but that's really what it comes down to, is can you get the close to the potential of those players? When all of those players are clicking, this team still has the talent to be very, very good. And I know you could look and say, well, Mark Giordano won the Norris that year. He's not there anymore. Yeah, that's fair. I'm not saying it's going to be, a first place in the Western Conference team if that happens, but they need all three of those players to be clicking at the same time. At the very least, 2 out of the 3. That just hasn't really happened over the last several seasons.
This text comes in. Best case scenario is the Flames get rid of those monotonous players like Gaudreau and Monahan. I got to say this about Gaudreau, though. The fact that they did not trade him prior to the July 28th deadline, he's got a 5-team move clause. So basically, he controls wherever he wants to go. I think for the Calgary Flames, best case scenario right now is to sign him to a contract extension at a decent price, because if you're going to try and trade him, well, I don't know what the trade market is, honestly, for Johnny Gaudreau right now. I know he had a decent end to the season. Once Daryl Sutter came on, his production started to go up, Jamie, but he controls where he wants to go. And it's 5 teams, like that certainly handcuffs the market for him. And what's his... I mean, it's still, I think, pennies on the dollars if you're going to want to get rid of him. So I don't think he's going to be gone from this team, and I think you have to think best case scenario, you got to get a deal done with him.
That's probably where this is headed. This text comes into the Calgary inbox, 960. The Flames need to move Monahan and find a player that protects Johnny Gaudreau so he can perform. And look, I don't have a problem with the idea of moving Sean Monahan, but I don't think the goal for Calgary should be bringing in muscle to protect Johnny Gaudreau. I get the thinking, okay, he's a smaller player, he needs space on the ice. But this is, as we said off the top of this show, right? There's a reason this team is in the Jack Eichel sweepstakes. It's because they need more high-end talent, not less, right? This isn't a case where, we've got all the talent we need. Now we just need to find guys to protect them. I mean, I don't really think any team in the NHL should be thinking that way. But the Flames in particular, if you're moving Monahan, it should be for a major upgrade at center, like a Jack Eichel, ideally.
Yeah, absolutely. Continue to get your texts in, 960, 650, 650. We're going to continue this conversation as the day goes on. But, Josh, let's get to what they're saying.
Bro, what are you talking about, man?
What are you saying?
Not saying anything.
You're saying something?
I guess that's what I'm saying, Brooksy.
Here's what they're saying.
Caught a few minutes, Jamie, just a few, of the Monday Night Football game between the New Orleans Saints and the Jacksonville Jaguars. But Ryan Clark, ESPN, he of course watched it. He was on the Fan 590 this morning, and he asked, did Jameis Winston do enough last night to earn a starting position with the Saints?
Well, I think, first off, if you're Sean Payton, you want Jameis to nail down the job. Like, this is best-case scenario, right? Because Taysom Hill is not a starting quarterback. And so if he has to be your starting quarterback, that means you're probably going to suck. And then on the other side of that, you take Taysom away from doing so many other things for your team, playing tight end, being a wildcat quarterback, being a gadget guy. So your hopes is that Jameis can take that job. And to answer your question, which I hadn't done yet, I believe he did. I believe when you see what he was able to do last night, also being able to push the ball down the football field, we didn't see that with Drew Brees the last 2 or 3 years. We didn't see that with Teddy Bridgewater 2 years ago. And you also didn't see that with Taysom Hill. I can think back to a wide-open Emmanuel Sanders who looked like he was catching a punt from Taysom Hill last year during one of those 4 starts. And so Jameis Winston worked extremely hard to get to this position, and I believe he gets the day 1 start.
Jamie, I mean, we don't have to break down his game last night. He had some nice throws and threw a couple of touchdown passes. But in your mind, is Jameis Winston the best option for the Saints at starting quarterback?
Yes, and it's not even close. I have never bought this idea that Taysom Hill is a potential starting NFL quarterback. I get that Sean Payton seems to really, really like Hill in a lot of different ways. I know Taysom Hill thinks he's going to be a starter in the NFL, and I know there's plenty of flaws you can pick in Jameis Winston's game. But no, it's clearly Jameis Winston. Like, he's clearly the best quarterback on the roster, and to me, he clearly gives the Saints the best chance to win. You saw a little bit of it in that preseason game. I've never understood the idea that Taysom Hill is going to take over and be the regular starter there.
Yeah, he didn't exactly put a whole lot of confidence when he started last year when Drew Brees was hurt. I mean, there was some flashes here and there, but let him be a gimmick guy. That's where he's good at. You know, it works for them. And all Jameis Winston has to do is basically not lose the starting job. Like, manage the football game. Don't try and win it on every possession and throw, a pick or 2 picks in the first quarter of the game. Like, just manage the game. Just be patient, like Drew Brees was later in his career. We don't have to do deep bombs, long bombs every time. Just run a more consistent, patient offense. And then, Sean Payton might not be willing to make that quick pull the trigger to Taysom Hill, because we do know how much Sean Payton loves him some Taysom Hill. Also, last night, we got to see Trevor Lawrence in action. Ryan Clark, once again, talks about what he saw from the rookie QB.
That the Jaguars going to get him killed. That was my biggest takeaway. That they better protect him. I mean, think back to last year in first overall pick Joe Burrow, a guy much like Trevor Lawrence and an extremely talented